To all of you, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and thank you very much for joining me today in what I hope will turn out to be a dialogue and discussion rather than a monotonic lecture. That was the whole purpose. I do want to approach you with a proposal, with an idea that we are working on, and my mission today is to see if I can get some of you interested in working and collaborating together on that project, but more about that later. I also want to thank Sikhi, which sponsors these webinars. They are to be congratulated for the effort they put in to bring Sikh brothers and sisters together to reflect on matters that are important to the Sikh community. And you know, the rubric for these online webinars, LIV, is an especially appropriate one for this discussion because you know, we are going to talk about a leadership model, and or at least what I have visualized as a leadership model that is based on Guru Nanak's teachings, and it is rooted in LIV. And LIV, as you know, is the polar opposite of Tat. These are two orientations that are available to us according to Gurmat, and both divinely ordained. The balance that we strike between them pretty much determines the quality of our lives. So I have some slides here, more as placeholders than anything else. So bear with me if you don't see the slides move too much. I really want to talk to you about the project back and forth if I can. So the overview, just for your edification, we will try and locate ourselves in history, see where we are as a community today, talk about the call of the Guru that is still valid, and then I would like to spend a bit of time on Guru Nanak's leadership model and then the Khoj Gurbani project. But it's important that we actually do the first three before we get to the fourth and fifth. So the idea is, you know, how do we apply the timeless universal message of Sikhi in today's world, especially across political, cultural boundaries. Now that is the call to which I'm trying to respond. And the response today is going to take two forms. One, a sort of an introspection on the community, which is the first three bullets you see there. And you might wonder why I'm trying to spend half my time introspecting. The reason is actually quite simple and quite compelling. You know, collective reflection is extremely necessary for us to be on the same page, for one thing, to set the context for the project. It'll give you an idea of what's been churning through my mind and the minds of a few of us who've been thinking about this project. It's important to understand our past, our history, and in this context, I think even more important to understand our colonial past and our current colonial mindset, which is what I want to talk about a little bit. And because that impacts on our ability to understand and assimilate Sikhi. And I think we who live in the diaspora are especially vulnerable to outside influences. So it's all the more important that we kind of locate ourselves. And then there is also an introspection at a personal level. You know, what is our personal commitment to being foot soldiers for the Guru's message? Because without this, the application itself could be fairly misapplied. So I would invite you to come along with me as we sort of go through this process, clarify some concepts, and see how we are going to move forward. So the second part of my presentation to you is going to be what the title here suggests, Young Minds, Sikh Global Leadership of the Future. This is aimed at seeding young minds with the message of Sikhi, preparing the soil, if you may, for global leadership of tomorrow. And we'll get into a little bit of why we think it's important and why we think it's compelling. So, as I said earlier, my purpose is to seek your counsel, your guidance, your participation, if this grabs you in any way, and your assistance. Uh, so you can see that, in putting forward this proposal to you, I am in fact putting forth many intertwined ideas. So it's going to be a bit of a ramble here and there, but I think eventually we'll come down to something very specific. So I personally believe that we as Sikhs have a moral obligation to propagate Guru Nanak's message, because that's how I understand the Guru-Chela uh, tradition that we have. And what I'm going to suggest to you eventually is that we need to create a cadre of what I have referred to in other places as contemporary khalsas. We need to build a contemporary brand of khalsas. These are men and women who will combine in their persons the wisdom of Gurbani and the egalitarian spirit of the khalsa, together with the best contemporary education. And then they go out into the world and create innovative and leading edge solutions in all domains of life. They'll be leaders in technology and science, but they'll work collaboratively, they'll communicate across cultural boundaries, and they'll be respectful of diversity. So the point is that their own lives will become the message of the Guru. But as I said earlier, also before we do that, we have to uncover the Guru's message for ourselves. We have to sort of hold a mirror to ourselves and see where we stand in relation to that message. So let's kind of start before we go there, just very quickly on a personal note. Much of my motivation for all this has come from my own experience as a diaspora Sikh. Over the years, I've increasingly become aware of my own double, if not triple consciousness. I mean, there is on the one hand a consciousness in me that has been shaped by a very traditional Sikh family and environment. And yet, on the other hand, there is a consciousness that was molded and shaped by Western education, if you will. I mean, first in Singapore, and then the Macaulayan system in India, and then in the United States. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm not alone in this. It's not all that unusual, because all of my Sikh friends, especially those who are English speaking, like me, have been shaped by dual identities. And the reason it's important for me is because I think there are consequences to having this dual identity, and we have to kind of figure out where we stand, because I think what has happened is that we have come to accept certain things and as a reality that in fact may not be so, and we'll see as we go along what I mean by that. So let's spend a little bit of time trying to locate the Sikh message, trying to locate Sikhs and Sikhi historically, ideologically, and ask ourselves, do we really understand Guru Nanak? I mean, I usually ask people, if you were asked to describe what did Guru Nanak stand for, what was his model of governance or economics, or what was his social vision, I have found that a lot of us are pretty hard pressed to articulate this in a let's say a 30-second elevator speech. I mean, we would be very hard pressed. Now, I'm not suggesting that we can actually grasp Guru Nanak that simply, but we have to make the attempt to be able to articulate his message pretty simply for ourselves so that we can act on it. So, Guru Nanak appeared on the scene over 500 years ago. And the important thing here, to me at least, is that his appearance on the scene was likened by Bhai Gurdas to the rising of a new sun, whose appearance dispelled the darkness of the ages. And also in the Savayas of the Bhatts, they mention that Guru Nanak basically turned the Ganges upstream, that he erected a new fort built on the foundation of truth, that he struck the coin of God's sovereignty on earth. A lot of these metaphors and allegories are extremely significant because I think what they are saying here is they are not really that concerned with Guru Nanak, the person, but what they're suggesting here is that Guru Nanak is representative of an absolutely new paradigm. This is a new paradigm, a new system, a revolution of the mind, a new way of looking at the world. In fact, I would say that Guru Nanak was basically birthing a new consciousness altogether. So we ought to be very clear about that, because what happens often is, and I think there are vested interests and our own ignorance, we kind of tend to reduce Guru Nanak from what we should be thinking of him to being, let's say, another reformer, someone who tried to synthesize Islam and Hinduism. We've all heard that, right? But I would say no. He is actually a new consciousness. He is giving us an extended consciousness for the world today as well, forever. This is independent of space, time. And it's very important that we understand that this is indeed a unique gift. And so what is this new consciousness that he's giving us? Again, just for clarity and for the fact that we all kind of are on the same page, the way I see it, this is obviously my visualization and understanding of Guru Nanak. I mean, I could be wrong, but the way I see it is that this new consciousness is characterized by the concept of ik, or oneness. Existence is undivided oneness. The totality of existence is embedded in each fragment of time and space. Jo Brahmande Soi Pinde. What that means is that this consciousness is inside of us and outside of us, and that the power of this consciousness, of this ik, is latent in each one of us. Mantu Jot Sarupa. So just imagine what Guru Nanak has done. I mean, this revolution of the mind. He has actually empowered us ordinary people with extraordinary potential to think of ourselves as being divinely potential. He's given us individual agency, empowerment. And I think the way I understand that is that he's basically telling us that you have this divine potential in you that needs to be developed, and you have to then shape the world with it. There is a responsibility with that power. Now, Ik also is affirming the diversity of the world. Rangi Rangi Pantika. So there's diversity, there is this extraordinary potential that we have, and there is an emergent quality to this ik, by which I mean that it is a self-organizing intelligence with agency in the natural world, and our individual agency, which we refer to in Gurbani as Haume, has to then submit or work with this universal regulating agency we call Hukam. And what do we have to do with that? We have to discover, we have to create, we have to renew, and we have to transform, and we have to shape the future. So, in essence, what I read Guru Nanak telling me is that we are no less than co-creators and partners in the unfolding of this universe. And that, to me, is the basis of this new leadership that I think we need to cultivate. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. Now, Guru Nanak's successes built on this uh, notion. They actually, Guru Arjan, as we know, he built a multicultural society. He actually compiled an anthology. Guru Granth Sahib is multilingual, it's multicultural. It is a symbol that that is how a society ought to be. And Guru Gobind Singh with the Khalsa has basically, I think, told us that we as Sikhs are meant to be watchdogs, watchdogs against hegemonic systems, watchdogs for the marginalized, watchdogs for the justice of Akal Purkh on earth. I think this kind of sums up my idea of what Sikh teaching means to me. Now, I also do believe that this experiment, this work, this foundation that our gurus have laid is work in progress. It isn't done yet. I feel that they're looking to us. They're looking to every generation of Sikhs to take on this work and move it forward. Because we have to remember, after all, they have given the Panth the strength and the authority to move this idea forward. So I think it is beholden upon us that we think collectively about how do we move this idea forward. So in some very important ways, this work is still unfinished and will remain so. And I think in some other ways, which should be of concern to us, is that this work has also, the message has become hijacked in some ways. And I will talk a little bit about that because it's important for us to understand. And mind you, as I speak about all of this, I'm speaking from a purely personal perspective. This has been my experience, my personal evolution. So when I say that I think this message is being hijacked, what I'm saying is that as I have, evolved in my understanding of Sikhi over the years, I have come to recognize that what I have accepted as Sikhi really wasn't the real message, that I just took what was given to me, handed down to me as authorized versions. And where did these versions come from? Where were they coming from? And that's what I mean by the colonization of our minds. And we need to be very cognizant of that. Because until I became aware of that, until I became cognizant of that in my own personal life and engagement with Sikhi, I just went along with the message that was given to me by our standard, channels. I don't want to get into the, we all kind of grew up on the same authors and the same books and all in English and coming to us from Western authors. And we kind of assimilated and lived with it. It wasn't until I actually went back to Gurbani on my own, without any assistance, and with Ardas, that I want to really understand what is being said, that I began to catch on to what was going on. I said, we are really, I felt that I had completely misread the message. So what I'm suggesting is that we Sikhs have to be very conscious of our colonization, our minority status, and our infrastructure and our institutions as they exist today, because I think they all need some work. So let me talk a little bit about the fact that we are a global minority. Now, I put out there because that's obvious that we are all over the globe now. But also, what is also obvious is that no matter where we are, I mean, we happen to be a minority. And the reason I bring this up is that because we are a minority, we are consistently surrounded by a dominant culture, whether it is in India, whether it is in the US, or wherever you happen to be living. You'll always have this situation. And I have reflected a little bit on this. What that means is that we have subconsciously taken on the the sort of dominant culture around us, without perhaps even being conscious of it. I mentioned English to you. The fact that I'm speaking to you in English right now is something that is an irony that isn't lost on me. It's precisely because our minds, we've adopted other languages, and that is why I wanted to talk a little bit about introspecting on where we are. So the problem with this colonization is that a lot of us have felt, at least I do, a loss of language. I feel that I feel that, a lot of us are not fluent in Punjabi, and a lot of us are not fluent in English either. That both these languages are transactional for us. We would be hard put to actually deal with complex ideas, either in English or in Punjabi. We are not proficient in either. Our knowledge of Punjabi, for the most part, may be perfunctory, by which I mean, yes, you can get along with it, but you probably wouldn't be able to deal in ideas in it. It has also caused some loss of meaning for us by adopting the meaning of the Guru Granth Sahib in English, has caused us to compromise, and that gets us into trouble, right? I mean, I think about terms like God, for instance. It's only now that we are beginning to revise our notion of Oankar as not a God that is cut off from creation, but a force that is a part of nature, that is nature. But we've lived with that notion of a mechanical explanation of God. Take the word dharma, for instance, which we tend to translate as righteousness, whereas I think it actually has no appropriate or adequate English translation. I mean, it just refers to a whole culture, the culture of Nam, for instance, within Sikhi. And because of all this, I think we also feel uh, a sense of pressure on us, on our identities. There's always this external pressure on the way we look, on our identity. There is always this pressure to blend in, when in fact our identity is telling us that you are meant to stand out. So I think you're all probably aware of some of these things that I'm talking about, but these are significant, and we need to be conscious of these things. That we are living in derived cultures, we are living on the edges of power. We do not really have any kind of real political leverage, whether it is anywhere for that matter. Uh, and for us in our personal lives, I mean, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of Sikhi am I living? I mean, am I just a Bekhi Sikh in the sense that I wear the externals? Am I a Basila Sikh? What am I? Am I a Sikh because I just happen to be born a Sikh? Have I accepted Sikhi as a belief system because it was given to me, or have I made a conscious decision to be a Sikh by stepping out of the margins of this belief? And these are some of the, have I made conscious choices to be a Sikh? Am I actually making the effort? Important things for us to ask. I mean, I'm a parent, and I often ask myself, what have I impressed my daughter with while I was bringing her up in the U.S.? I mean, have I actually stressed to her that the goal of Sikhi should transcend all other goals that we set for them? I mean, probably not. I don't think that I have actually spoken to her in terms of, that your goal in life is to transcend your home. I don't think I have put it to her that way, and I doubt that any one of my friends that I know has put it quite that way. I think that's what we need to do. We really have to be very serious about the message. So I've spoken to you a little bit about colonization. I've spoken to you a bit about being a global minority. Now, by the way, being a global minority, I think we are probably always will be a global minority. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't know. But I do know this, that it is an opportunity and a challenge at the same time. What it tells me is that we are not to be bound by political boundaries. Because we are global and we are a minority, I think we need to be like the flavor in a community. And that reminds me of this Sakhi that we hear of Guru Nanak traveling to Multan and being told by the fakirs and the peers there, how he was greeted with a glass of milk with a flower petal floating at the very top, a suggestion to Guru Nanak that, by the way, there is really no room for another philosophy here, that this place is full of peers and fakirs. Well, Guru Nanak had a splendid response to that. And the response was, he actually, well, he was given a glass of milk that was floating, brimming with milk. Guru Nanak actually placed a flower petal and returned it. That, I think, was just a beautiful way of saying that we really do not occupy physical space. We are like the essence. We are like the flavor. So I think that is how Sikhs are meant to live in the world, like the flavor, the essence. As I said earlier, we are watchdogs. So wherever we live, we want to make sure that justice, that people are being served well, that we speak up against political or economic corruption. So I think the Gurus have given us a marvelous role. And then I want to just briefly touch on, our institutions and infrastructure. Where has all this gotten us? I think that the Gurus have given us institutions and the infrastructure in embryonic form. But as I said earlier, every generation has to go back and work on them, you see, for them to remain alive. And our problem, as I see it, is in terms of institutions and infrastructure, is that we lack the methodology, we lack the terminology to actually implement on the institutions as they exist today. I mean, just an example is, calling a Sarbat Khalsa, which was done, I believe, not long ago. And, part of the quarrel there was who's to call it? And we have this internal, issues with each other, which we also need to address, but I won't go there today. So I feel like we lack the terminology, we lack the understanding on how to revive some of these institutions and customize them to our needs today. Big work that we have to do. So that said, here is the definition, which I will quickly go over, is of what we are trying to create in this project. How do we fill the world with contemporary sages and kick-ass saints, gurmukhs? I picked this up from somewhere. I just liked the way it was written, and I adapted it. And I spoke about this a little earlier. These are people who are imbued, totally embedded in Gurbani and in the Khalsa spirit of service on the one hand, and who are at the other side, as I said, products of the best education, leaders in technology, who can bring this together to find solutions for a world that we know today is very divisive, for a world that is looking. Believe it or not, I come from the world of management, and a lot of the thinking on leadership today is really, if it weren't called something else, I would tell you, is based on Gurmat. And I want to talk at some length about the leadership model that I have adapted from people like Peter Senge and others at MIT who have used this model to describe organizational theory of change. So I've just taken it and visualized the leadership model that we want to implement. And I have used this in the past, and it has served me rather well in explaining the journey of how we want to actually use this model to train and develop global leadership tomorrow. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes on this. So some of you, if you've already heard me talk about this, bear with me, because I'm constantly adapting this model. I'm constantly updating it. So you see that the model is a U-curve, basically, and there is a reason it's a U-curve, because there is an inversion implied here. And on the left-hand side, you see Haume, and on the right, you see Hukam. Now, this framework is basically how I view the message of Sikhi, that there is a symbiotic relationship between Haume and Hukam. So to put it very simply, the whole idea is, think about it this way. Haume is our conditioned self, which is grounded in physical reality, bound by time and space. Hukam, on the other side, is the part of us that is unbounded, non-physical reality, our essence. And between these two, there is a cleavage or a split or a fracture, whichever way you want to see it. I mean, another way to see this would be that our minds have been split into two, or it appears to have been split into two. And the goal, and this apparent the separation, by the way, I see as an illusion of Maya. So, there is in Asa Diwar, Apine Aap Sajyo, Apine Rachyo Na, Due Kudrat Sajye. There's this process of creation. So Gurbani tells us that the very process of creation does create Haume, and creates this kind of feeling of split. So the goal of our human life then is to recognize our authentic self, our source, which is Hukam, Mantu Jot Sarup hai apna mool pachan. So what that is telling us is discover who you are and discover yourself, not by relying on any ideologies, because Guru Nanak is saying Hukam nu bujna. He didn't say go read a book. So what he's saying is no ideologies, not what you're being told, but by developing a certain capacity. The capacity, and it is the capacity to sense the world around you, because that is what is going to bring you to Hukam as it operates. And what happens here is this development requires for us to bring out faculties in us that are already present, but are usually dormant and or not intelligible to us because we are not paying attention. So the way to do this is Hukam Rajai Chalna, submission, or I would say even more than submission, I think what it is saying is lack of resistance to the way that the world operates naturally. And that is what a Sikh life is all about. So you have to cultivate certain practices, a certain awareness, should I say, rather than practices. So when you are sitting on the left, that is where we all are at. And as I said earlier, we are there given two orientations, both divinely ordained, live and dhat. They're both divinely ordained. Dhat, as I am trying to point here, is outward looking. That is what gives you worldly desire. This is really what fuels the rat race. This connects with the senses. And live is its polar opposite as I see it. And that is where the inversion is required. And Haume then is basically your conditioned self, your bounded self, your blind spot, the Kurdipal that does not let you see beyond. You're looking in terms of cause and effect. You can't see beyond cause and effect. You can't see in terms of patterns. You can't use your other faculties that I'm referring to. And I think that is really what needs to be done. So the point is, We have to, so the leadership that we want to develop, how does this apply to that? What, and I'll get to that when we talk about the project, but we have to bring youngsters to start this journey on the left-hand side. By the way, the left-hand side represents the personal aspect. So as you turn inwards and develop your capacity for live, that's why it's a you. It just implies that you will be plumbing the depths of your own being deeper and deeper to go beyond the world of thought that basically is holding you bound. And I've got Sunya and Manya in there because that is, to me, the inner technology or the inner methodology, if you will, that Guru Nanak has given us, right? I don't want to get into detail on this, but the fact is that he's calling us to become attentive listeners. And we might think that we are listening, and that listening is probably self-evident to a lot of us. Guru Nanak is emphasized in almost 1/10 of the Japji. He's begging this obvious question, are we not listening already? Or is there another kind of listening that Guru Nanak wants us to cultivate? And I think he is suggesting that we go beyond ordinary, passive, inattentive hearing, shrouded by, he's asking us to actually connect with the deeper self. So, and he has actually given us the method for that, and that is Sunne Mane Man Ki Tabao. So that is the methodology then that we have to cultivate in the people who are going to take this journey. And as what this model shows is that as you develop and move down this process, you're approaching what I have said, what I've called presencing or Nam. This is the practice, the destination, how you basically recognize your mood. It's kind of like going through the eye of a needle here. This is a deeper source of knowing. It is where you become aware of hukam. You begin to see hukam not through your regular senses, but as I said earlier, through deeper faculties that we all have. You also begin to understand that you're really not the bounded self that you thought you were. You begin to realize that you are, as a matter of fact, part of a very large network, that you are just one communication cog in a huge network. What that does to you is that it actually creates in you a sense of chardi kala, which I have up there, which I would say is being completely inspired, being optimistic, being forward-looking. And by the way, hukam to me is, we refer to it as the laws of nature, which it is, obviously. It is the regulating agency. But I think what we are being asked to do here is, so there are some implications here when we say it is the law of nature. What I take Guru Nanak to be telling us is that the physical world around you not only impacts you physically, it obviously does, because our nervous system is in constant touch with the external world, whether we know it or not. It's taking in sensory input all the time. But eventually it also affects your awareness and therefore affects your culture. It affects meaning. It affects what you do at every level. So it behooves us to cultivate the ability, this capacity, which Babaji has given us the methodology for, to be able to sense and understand hukam as it appears as an emergent future. It always appears as an undefined future that people with this capacity can feel. And this is what distinguishes leaders from others. That, in fact, is a lot of management literature today as well. So I think that Guru Nanak has given us the methodology, he's given us the message, he's told us, hey, every individual out there should do this, is capable of doing this. So that, with that said, I want to quickly move on to the Coach Gurbani project and how it all began. So here's the idea. I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and in Columbus we have a local Gurdwara with about, I would say, 200 odd families from the region. And we have about 40 or 50 kids, I would say, between the ages of 6 and 17, 18. And, we struggle with how do we educate them in terms of Gurmukhi, Punjabi. We obviously want to preserve the culture. And it's something that is always facing us. And that's where this thought began. I was concerned that, like myself, when I looked at a youngster, I felt that, this kid who's about 10 or 12 now, I'm sort of going back to my days in Singapore, is probably being subjectively formed. His identity is being subjectively formed not at home, despite what his parents do. Despite how much time they're spending trying to teach him Punjabi, but he's being formed by the school around him. He's being formed in another environment. So how do we counter this to the best of our ability? Gurdwaras, Sunday schools, as I say, they're just Sunday schools. So, that isn't going to cut it. The investment there isn't worth much. Different Gurdwaras do it differently. We have online web portals. You can get information here, there. I've talked about people who write books or write articles. To me, they're all fairly limited. What I basically wanted to do was how do we catch a kid early enough and keep him under our wing, so to speak. And the question I try to ask myself was, how do we infiltrate a child's mental world? And the technology is there. We have the technology. So here's what I thought would make sense. Every kid, at least in our community, I know education is important, is definitely spending time in the evenings, typically, at the kitchen table, at the study table, doing homework. And my thought was, how do we conspire? And I use the word because it is a bit of a conspiracy. How do we conspire with the parents of this kid who's maybe 7, 8 years old? That's where we want to catch them. And slip in a daily dose of Gurbani. By that I mean, how do we, just as an example, give them a passage from Gurbani in Gurmukhi, as well as in the Roman transliteration, as well as an English explanation to begin with. My thought is that unless a child looks at Gurmukhi akkars every day, unless he sounds them or she sounds them every day over an extended period of time, Gurmukhi is not going to actually seep inside of you. The Punjabi word that I love is rachni nahi bani, Gurmukhi. And why is Gurmukhi important? Because I think that if Gurmukhi does not become, doesn't seep into you, you're once removed from the message. You're once removed from the message. And there was a reason that Guru Nanak, went to such lengths to standardize a script that accommodates divergent languages. So I, personally, very keen on the notion, and I'm self-taught in many ways, so I feel very, very strongly about the fact that we have to present our children with the letters every day. So you're 8 years old. We're giving you just one passage. It's no more than 10 minutes a day. So the parents conspire with us. We can send it to you via the technology that is available to us. So imagine this. A child begins to look at Gurmukhi every day. And then we develop a curriculum that then, that is appropriate to the child. And as I speak to you, I'm going to try and see if I can bring up a mind map that I tried to create and see if I can actually share that with you. Perhaps not, but you're getting the drift. I mean, I'm trying to actually infiltrate a child's home and have him look at Gurbani every day. Now, I've had some opposition to this. They feel that I'm being too, optimistic. But I remain optimistic. I think this can be done. We should do it. Let me just bring this up for a second here, if I can. I did a mind map on this. Yes, here it is. So on the right side, which is sort of hidden by this, let me just take that out. Can you see this, Vineet? Can you see the mind map now?
Yes, we can, Virji.
Okay, so this is still work in progress. So the idea is, you want to develop all kinds of skills: kirtan, history, Gurbani Vichar, memorization. So not only should they see Gurmukhi, but at that age, repetition and memorization. That would be something that we would cultivate. So the idea is you take 15 minutes a day, you conspire with a parent, you say to them, will you work with us? And by the way, I've had at least 10 families in Columbus that have said to me, you do this, we will work with you. And I think there is another advantage to this. A lot of parents themselves are actually not that adept at Gurmukhi. Guess what? It helps them too. So an ancillary to this idea, which is actually where we began and then turned to this, was we want to keep track of these kids from the time that they are 7 or 8 all the way to the time that they're 18. So we want to get people, mentors, if you will, because we'll create mentors in the process, adults in the community, who will then mentor these children until they're 18, make sure they're getting exposed to progressive levels of Gurbani, but also creating a pool of instructors and tutors who will help these children with their daily homework, make it interesting for them. So I know people here locally who have said to me, hey, by the way, if a kid needs any help, I can Skype with them and I can help them with math, or somebody could help them with English. I mean, whatever the case may be. So we actually start linking children with people who are willing to give, maybe a couple of hours a week of their time in the evenings and help them even with their homework. So tracking them and also developing extracurricular skills with them, okay? Not just their academics, but Gurbani, academics, and you join that with softer skills, leadership skills, presentation skills, physical skills, maybe skills with arms. I mean, Guru Gobind Singh, I think, mandated that Sikhs must know how to handle arms. There's no reason that we shouldn't learn how to handle arms. So have a very composite, holistic training, but Gurbani at the core of this training. No two ways about it. Imagine, so my personal goal would be, if I can walk a child from the age of 7 or 8 through 18, what does that look like at the age of 18? 1, he would know Gurmukhi. 2, he would have memorized the Banis. 3, he would be familiar with Kirtan. No, at least he might be very good, but at a minimum, he would know how to do Kirtan. 4, he would be able to do some Vyakhya. 5, he would have completed one full reading of Guru Granth Sahib in those years. So that's the kind of outcome. And then last but not least, we want to ensure that when he's 18 and he's gone through this training, that he should be ready to go to the best institutions in the world, anywhere in the world. They should be actually fighting over this young Sikh youth, boy or girl. That's the kind of pool or cadre that we need to create. And I think it is doable if we all work together. Now, the good thing is that we've had some interest, and I'll just give you a quick update on, I've got to keep an eye on time. We've had some interest. We've got people out in Australia, we've got people in Chicago, in Boston, in Columbus, who are willing to actually work on this. So we have some challenges, obviously. We've had several meetings. We meet regularly. We actually meet to do Gurbani Vichar every Wednesday nights. And so some of this comes up. So some of the challenges we have is we want to create content that uses contemporary idiom. We don't want to just go out there and willy-nilly pick up whatever. So just to give you an example, teaching the alphabet to children. Now we know there is a lot of Udayara Pattis out there, but our thought is that we want to start with Guru Nanak's Patti, which starts with a Sasa, not with an Uda. So we want to do things like that, and we want to obviously develop, create categories of how we are going to approach a 6-year-old or 7-year-old who doesn't know Gurmukhi and an 18-year-old who doesn't know Gurmukhi. They could both be the same place in terms of Gurmukhi, but we'd have to find different ways to teach them. So there's content creation that has to happen, some standardization. But imagine what we could do with this. We could be creating the foundation for a lot of things that the Sikh community, in my mind, needs. We are lacking in textual production. There is absolutely no literature worth its name coming out from our communities. We need to actually have our own media. Now, before I go on, there is some excellent work being done in all of these areas, and I don't want to minimize this. There are organizations that are attempting to do this, but I don't think any one of these organizations has Gurbani and Gurmat at its core center. So this is the difference. But as we create this core, we would be doing textual productions because we have to create content. We have to create media. What about a think tank? What about a theological seminary? I can see one developing out of this process, because this process is not just for 5 years or 10 years. This process is forever. This has to continue on, and it will continue to change and adapt itself. So I see that this has potential. I obviously will find out during the course of my lifetime whether this is just pie in the sky or whether this has some potential to develop. My thought is this: at a minimum, even if I succeed at a minimum, and my partners, people we are working, at least some of you will have heard this. And a lot of you out there are a whole lot smarter than I am. Maybe you will have a better way for implementing this. Maybe the idea will get sown in your head. And you could say, you know what, this kind of makes sense, but a lot of what he's saying, meaning me, is nonsense. This needs to be done this way. I think that would be wonderful. So my current occupation is, whoever will listen to me, I talk about this. I was in San Jose a few weeks ago at a conference, and I said to them, look, rather than going through the esoteric mumbo jumbo of, this concept or that concept, can we talk about this project? Now, I do get positive responses, but everyone says this is very difficult. Well, I realize that, but it's doable. And I want to reach out to all of you to give this a thought, to come back with ideas, to help push this forward. I think it is key that we make Gurmat the center of our lives, the center of our children's lives. And in that process, we will rediscover, reclaim Sikhi that I feel has been hijacked from us. With that, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Guruji, for that lovely presentation. Just a reminder to everyone that for the question and answers, you can post your questions on the right panel and send me your questions, or if you want to ask the question to a presenter, you can request and I will activate your mic. We do already have one question, Guruji, and I believe it's a clarification question. In the slide where you're talking about Home and Hukam, and the question is the network that you were referring to. Could you clarify what you mean by that network? When one becomes aware of the Hukam, they feel part of a larger network.
Yes. I guess I used some IT terminology here deliberately because a network has nodes, and they're basically messaging one another. So the recognition or the realization that dawns on you, is the message of oneness. What that means is that you begin to realize that what is in you is actually in the other as well. So there is no other left. So what that means, the network, the nodes here are everybody else. You begin to realize that in essence we are all the same, and that we are basically communicating with each other, and we ought to communicate with each other better.
Thank you.
There is another implication to that I might add. What that also tells you is that it is not all about me. It is about being part of a much larger cause. And I think that is what teaches you to think beyond your own belly and to get out of what I've referred to as an ecosystem, which is Haume, and start working in an ecosystem, which is Hukam.
Perfect. We do have another question from Kulvinder Singh in Sacramento. Although I'm going to ask him to clarify that question for us.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to give the audio phone to Kulvinder Singh so he can ask the question through the mic. So Kulvinder Singh, we have unmuted you. You can ask the question.
Haji, I'm looking at this screen. It looks more like a underground map of London.
It does. It looks like London subway.
But when we're referring to, these general concepts that have been in our culture, whether it's seva or sangat or it's hukam, and you're trying to apply it to technology, I was trying to get you to help us, those of us more in the West who've heard these terms, try to apply them. So would you say this network is a group doing seva, like Langar for the homeless? We do that in Sacramento about once a month. Is it Facebook groups? We have Jakara. They're doing all kinds of things in high schools now, and also they have Sikh scholar conferences. I believe possibly even on the East Coast they have them on the West.
Mm-hmm.
At Stanford. What I was trying to get you to share was some more of the how to recognize the network and how to use the network that we have.
Well, I mean, when I use the term network, the Guru has already given us a term for the network, which is Sangat. Uh, and so what I mean, so let me go back. You know, I use the term network in terms of the symbiosis between Haume and Hukum, right? So from feeling isolated and feeling like you're the only one or that it's all about you, you begin to see yourself as part of a larger whole. Now, the Guru also tells us that, look, this is not a solo journey. Sikhi is the inner mountain is to be climbed alone, yes, but you have to be anchored in a network, in a sangat. So that to me is the sort of unifying theme here, is everything happens in a sangat, which means that there is a cause that is larger than your own little, cause, whatever that might be, and that is how you are to work. And in our, you've actually given us some wonderful examples of how networks are coming together. We have coalition, we have Salda, Jekara, a lot of other, Insaf, and so on. So what I am proposing here is a similar initiative with a slightly different nuance, with a slightly different flavor to it. You know, all of these organizations that you've mentioned are doing part of what I've talked about in terms of, textual production or justice or human rights and activism and so on. But my thought is that I want to catch Sikh youth very young, and I want to imbue them with Gurbani if I can. And I'm basing this on my own experience. I wish that I had been carried through this process myself.
So are you still able to hear me, Ji?
Yeah, Haji.
Okay, Ji. Let me go somewhere that may be a little unusual here. Since I'm in California and I'm a lawyer, I've been in practice about 20 years now. I have seen the divisions, whether it's Jat, non-Jat, whether it's now this Ambedkar and the Ravidas groups, whether it's the people who support Trump, who, no matter what you tell them, I'm talking about Sikhs, don't really see the racism and the other implicit bias that's in some of those groups. I'm also seeing sharp divisions, whether it's referendum 2020, whether it's the Baba Ranjit Singh, and there's so much happening for the young people. It's confusing who want to participate, who want to be active, but our Sikh groups are probably as divided as they are in Punjab.
Oh, no question about it.
What can we do about it?
I think what we can do about it is to just sort of slog along a bit. So let me give you just a very small example on what we can do. So I'm involved with a weekly discussion group, and I used to run Talking Stick some years ago. The one thing that stood out in that group was that there are two things that I'm speaking for myself personally here that I've always wanted to drive. One is I've always wanted to invite divergent views where there might be disagreement, but without becoming disagreeable. So far, the groups that I have been involved in, I think I'm lucky perhaps that I found groups like that. We've come from very different perspectives. You know, Coach Gurbani, which is what we do every Wednesday, for example, I'll tell you, we have what we call American Sikhs participating regularly. They talk about the yoga and Kundalini and all the rest of that stuff. And on the other extreme, we have people from, outfits that I hadn't even heard about, who come to Gurbani from a completely different perspective. Then there is me. I mean, I have my own little perspective, and there are others. The point is, just to give you an idea, that when we first began, there's a lot of differences. So this one particular individual would come on and say, "You're all confused. Let me tell you what the truth is." right? Um, 2 years into this discussion, we've been doing it for 2 years now, this same individual now comes on and says, by the way, this is what I think, but I could be wrong. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is that that is the sort of thinking we want to encourage. No matter what your opinion is, we are all different. And I think that is part of Hukam. I mean, we are all looking at Gurbani through the filters of our own experience, and we will have some differences. But the core should remain, unaltered. The core is the core. And I think what should we do? I think we need to. I don't know the answer really. We have divisions everywhere, and I think that's part of my challenge. Can we reclaim Sikhi? Can we recapture Sikhi? Can we, in our small ways, go out there and talk about the potential that you have within Sikhi? I don't know if that's going to address your question, but I recognize, what you're saying very well, indeed.
Haji Virji, can I take you to not just, the fact that some people may support Trump or some support the Baba Ranjit Singh. The other thing that's going on across the country is litigation over control of gurdwaras.
Oh, absolutely.
So that has to do not with, I want to spread Sikh, I want to include people from, the mainstream community, which is not Sikh, which is not Punjabi speaking. That's, it's my family, and I want to run the show here, and I want to have my name on the, executive committee.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that? I mean, they believe they're doing what they need to do because the people that were doing it before were doing it their way.
I mean, I was running the local gurdwara here for some years, so I kind of had a sense of what you're saying, and I quickly recognized that running a gurdwara was really not my cup of tea. But I stay involved with the Gurdwara, and I work closely with different, spectrums. I don't belong to any one particular. I'm very personally. I'm very. I make sure that people understand that kini kiya tada. I'm not into any tada. Let's stick with Gurbani. What do we do about these people? Look. The fact is that it's all a power play. Okay, and when you have a power play, that's what happens. There have been some efforts that the World Sikh Council has made to bring conflict resolution methodologies, but they haven't worked too well. What I would say to you is that we as a community, my own sense is that we have a long way to go. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The good news is that I see young people around me who are interested, want some guidance, but they don't know where to go, and I think that is where we need to step in and help them. I was at a seminar on mental health at Ohio State University, and a young Sikh college student came to me and said, "Uncle, in the Bible they talk about demons of the mind. Do we have something similar here?" And that only indicated to me that this kid needed some education. That's it. The Gurdwara Prabandhaks need some education. The Gurdwara Granthis need some education. We all need some education. But I think we can do it together. I'm optimistic. Despite everything, I remain optimistic. I think we had these divisions even in the time of the Gurus, and they managed to pull us along. I hope that helps.
For sure. Thank you, Virji. Thank you, Kulvinderji, for your questions. Ravinderji, we do have another question from Paramjit Singh, and they're asking what opportunities there are to educate ourselves that will make these issues that we are just discussing into non-issues.
The answer is quite simple, Viji. You've said what opportunities there are for ourselves. So it begins with ourselves. My experience, which I share with you, is get engaged with the Guru. Develop a relationship with the Guru at a personal level. And what that means is Gurmat, Gurbani, the Guru should not be an add-on in your life. It should be core center. Apne aap nu pucho, what is your lifestyle like today? Are you, do you spend time with the Guru? If you do you reflect? Do you do vichar? Are you then trying to change yourself accordingly? So my recommendation to you would be, so I said earlier, that I grew up not knowing Punjabi. I was 11 when my father got concerned about it, and I thank him for it. He sent me to Delhi at that point because he said, Munda Punjabi nahi bolta, tera ki banega. So I was sent to live with my grandparents. And but nonetheless, I learned to speak, but I couldn't read very well. And here's what I did. I just started to teach myself many years ago. And I would listen to tapes, and I started to teach myself. And then I became quite good at it. And I did ardas, and I said to the Guru, look, I've heard all of these interpretations, I've read all of these books, but I want a personal experience. And I will assure you that if you do it honestly, and if you do it, with your heart, and do it with an ardas to the Guru will respond. I can guarantee you that much. But you have to be honest in doing this. It should not be a transactional relationship. It shouldn't be, main paath karanga te manu, ye kara de ya ye kara di te main paath kar langa. Go to the Guru and say, look, help me out. That's what you can do. And I think once you begin to do that, baki, all of these problems will just kind of not matter that much. You will either find a solution, or you will you'll do what you have to do regardless. I hope that helps.
Right. No, for sure. And the clarification question or a follow-up that came in is going back to Guru Nanak's leadership model. And earlier you mentioned, Virjay, that there are a lot of organizations and projects that are underway that are addressing the Sikh thesis and ideology in our communities, but they do lack the Gurbani core and the inspiration from Gurbani.
Yeah.
So does that mean that those organizations or the leadership or the ideology in those organizations is still, they haven't passed that presencing and the nam stage or becoming aware? Because it...
Are you done?
Yeah, yes, if that, okay. Or do you need clarification?
No, I think I get the... No, I think, I hope that I'm not giving you the impression that we are sitting here gauging, where anybody is along this trajectory. Not at all. We are certainly not in that business. I certainly am not in that business. All we are saying is that, and I just, use this illustration because it helped me understand myself. It helped me kind of convey, and I think it's a good way to actually have a conversation about what the journey of a Sikh should look like. So with that in mind, if you use that as your background, I would say it is important for a Sikh to answer that question himself and say, where am I along this journey? Because nobody else can really, there is no sort of barometer that I can use to say, you sort of have passed the test and you haven't. You yourself have to do it, and you know pretty much where you stand, and you should be able to answer the question to yourself, have I really, where am I in this journey? Where am I in my relationship with the Guru? What I do want to say about the other organizations is that they are doing work that is extremely vital. They're doing work that is very necessary. They've all popped up at times when we needed them, and they're doing some great work. Community activism is absolutely needed. And so not to at all minimize what they're doing. Not at all. All I'm suggesting is that we need to begin to develop the core of Sikhi again. We need to revisit the message of Sikhi in the light of contemporary knowledge. Look, we're all trained people in some ways. We are doctors, we're engineers, we're lawyers, we're IT folks. We are interested, we read, we look at the world, we live in the US, we have opinions. We have to look at Gurbani, and we look for validation as well. We want to say, hey, you know what? I have these filters on. Does Gurbani actually, will it validate this? May not be the right approach, but I can assure you that once you start this process, you will find that it sort of does. In fact, it gives you the lodestone of what you need. And that's where I'm coming from, is that we absolutely have to go back to the Guru Granth Sahib. My contention is that we are not doing that. I mean, when I tell some people, by the way, in the Gurudwara, when I talk about this, one young fellow came up to me and says, Paji, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨਾ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕਰਿਆ ਕਰੋ. So there you go. He said it half jokingly, and I took it that way. But if you tell someone, hey, are you up at Amrit Vela, they start arguing with you about Amrit Vela is not, clock time. Yeah, maybe it's not clock time, but you're arguing about little things. What you're saying is that I'm not willing to get into the very first step, which is discipline, Jat Para. I'm not willing to do that. That's what we have to be able to answer to ourselves, not to anybody.
For sure. We have another question, and that is, what stage of this project, for the Coach Gurbani project, do you need help at this point?
We need help with people who might know how to create content. So I'm working with some people in California. She actually is an American Sikh, but she also writes. She does cartoons. The cartoons that have Sikh characters in it. I forget the name now. I'm past reading cartoons right now. Maybe I should. So we need people who will join us in helping us to establish some content, in helping us establish classifications of what the expectation might be, let's say, for a 6 to 8 year old. What should we expect at the end of that 1 year when the kid turns 8 years? Like I said, I think he should know the alphabet. He should have memorized Japji Sahib, maybe. Things of that nature. And more than that, I would say just join us and give us ideas. I mean, we are just a self-organized group. I mean, we have no political authority. We are just welcoming everyone. And as I said, a lot of you have such marvelous ideas out there. So help us out.
Thank you. We do have another question, and the question is, should we also study other faiths while we're on this journey?
My answer would be yes. I think that we ought to be broad. You have to look at, take a clue from the gurus themselves. I, often say, let's see what Guru Nanak was doing. He was traveling around. He talks about other systems. He talks about, makes references. Guru Gobind Singh, trained the Nirmalas and the systems that were prevalent then. So I see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be studying other systems. I think we should be totally engaged and understand other systems. In fact, they will help you locate yourselves better. When I had a Catholic friend that I used to talk about Sikhi with, and he said to me, you know what, a lot of what you're saying is sounding like Catholicism. And I said, heaven forbid, but there you are. Yes, my answer is yes. Be interested in the world, be interested in stuff around you, but above all, be interested in Guru Nanak. I'm telling you again and again that we haven't begun to understand this Guru that has been given to us. We are inheritors of a marvelous heritage, a splendid heritage. Please, please, please take advantage, embrace him. And by that I mean, don't just accept whatever is being told to you. Embrace him in the terms of understand him. Go to his Bani yourselves. That's the key.
Thank you, Guruji. And Sukhvinder ji would like to thank you for your response to that.
I thank you too to him for listening, for putting up with me for this long.
So at this time, we have no more questions, and I would like to invite everyone or anyone who does have any further questions to send them in the question chat box. But we are coming to the close of our webinar, that being said. So I'd like to thank you for everyone who has asked questions. And my apologies if we're not able to get to anybody's questions. You're more than welcome to ask us those questions on our Twitter handle or Facebook page, and we will be sure to post the replies there. Please be reminded that these webinars are provided for free, and there is a cost associated with its technology and administration. So if you feel that you've benefited from this particular webinar or others in the past, please consider making a donation to Sikhi or becoming a webinar sponsor in future. More details can be obtained in the following email that you will receive, or you can email us at info@sikhi.org. A reminder, everyone, please wait after we end this session for a few minutes, because there will be a follow-up survey where you can provide us with your feedback, which is extremely important to the Sikh Research Institute to improve our future webinars. And we will really appreciate the time that you dedicate to that follow-up. And I would now like to hand back to Ravinder Singh Ji if you have any closing comments for our webinar.
No, I would like to thank each one of you for indulging me. It really is an indulgence. It's an hour and a half for giving me your attention. Thank you so very much. And if you have any questions or would like to know more about the project, please, you can approach me. You can get my email from Sikhi. Thank you very much again. Guru Fateh Ji, Waheguru Ji Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Ravinder Ji. My gratitude towards you for sharing such an enlightening concept to us, especially the introspection that we need to do to become better personifications of Gurbani in our life. As I end this webinar, I'd like to thank you and the Sikhi and the audience especially for your Sangat today. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.